Hi, I'm Hans Rogel. I'm your current Pikes Peak RSC Board of Directors President.
And I'm Mark Hubert, RSC Board of Directors Vice President. And we want to welcome you to this edition of Partners in Real Estate, your local MLS marketplace. Hey, applications for RSC Director positions are going to be opening soon. And with that in mind, we're here to talk about the role an RSC Director plays in making decisions that are important to your local MLS marketplace. So Hans, as the current RSC Board President, tell us, how long have you been an RSC Director and why'd you get involved?
Well, I've been a director 6 years, okay. Including the vice presidency. And before that, I had really nothing with Pikes Peak or Association of Realtors or anything of the governing part of the association and RSC.
Sure.
I had an issue with a status in the MLS that I would like to have seen changed, and sent that to Lori. Lori got Jacob, the then president, to call me. Okay. He called me. He said, "You know what? I don't think this is going to have any chance in front of the board."
Okay.
And we had a very interesting discussion. At the end of that discussion, he said, "You know what? Maybe you should come to the board and do that presentation." And in the end, I did that, and the change was implemented, and they approved it,
nice.
Which was really good. From there, there was another broker, well-known broker here in town, who said, "You know what? Maybe you should just run for a director's position or for the association or something like that. And I will sponsor you to get into the Leadership Academy." And so I joined the Leadership Academy. That was 2016, I believe, and graduated. And when that was done, I'm like, okay, so now what? Right? And so I applied for professional standards and grievance, but they were full at the time, and I was going to get that later, maybe. And then I ran into Jacob, and I said, "Jacob, do you need anybody at RSC?" And Jacob said, "Yeah. You should join the board." And he was very supportive of me, and so I joined the board.
Okay.
And had Jacob as a president for a year, and then Patrick Muldoon, Tony Rose, Andrea, Weldon, and Scott, the last one.
So it sounds like you got on the board based on how a lot of people get on the board. Hey, I have an issue with what's going on in the MLS. How do I fix it?
Most people get on the board like that because they don't see. And they don't know what all it entails to run an MLS,
right.
Or what happens with all the data and things like that. And then they have an issue with it, and some people will get that issue resolved, like I got my issue resolved. But as an example, Scott Sufak, who was last year's president, he got in front of the board and he did not get his issue resolved. But he still wanted to be on the board.
Yeah.
To make an impact, and that's
right.
I think that's a great way of giving back to your community.
1000%. So since your time on the board, has your perspective changed in what you thought the RSC board was responsible for?
Yes, the perspective has changed in the sense that it's like the first, I would say, 3 years were easygoing, and after that it got into a kind of like rapids.
Okay.
It's kind of going whitewater.
Whitewater rafting.
Yeah, whitewater rafting, because we got all this stuff coming at us. We got all this technology from AI to whatever else is out there.
Yeah.
And rental bees, not to mention. But there's a lot of stuff that comes at us. And besides that, and that's something that I didn't realize when I joined the board,
sure.
There's also a lot of political stuff that happens, or stuff that has to do with new laws, stuff that has to do with lawsuits, whatever. There's a lot of stuff coming at us that we have to entertain ourselves with, so to speak. We have to make decisions and take directions on that as to where we're going to go with this board.
Right. So are there any misconceptions about the RSC board that you personally want to clarify for the subscribers?
Yeah, there is multiple, but I can tell you there's one, and I'll go back in history. When I joined the real estate community in 2001, so I've been in it for 23 plus years. For my then broker, I heard everywhere, "Oh, you know what? You don't want to deal with the association. You don't want to deal with the MLS because you know what? It's an old man's club." And to this day, there's still people that feel we're an old man's club, and we're not. I have to say that if I see the number of people that come into the board of directors of RSC every year, 2, 3, 4 sometimes at a time, and they're not people that have served before. They're not necessarily people that have been on a committee, although some will have been on a committee and moved up from there. But in general, they're new. It's new, fresh blood, so to speak, with fresh ideas that are willing to take their time out of their schedules for free to run this corporation so that our subscribers may benefit.
Yeah, it's great. I always, especially our 3 new members, I love it when folks want to get involved, realizing the sacrifice that they're going to have to make to serve the subscribers.
Yes.
Love that.
So Mark, what got you started as a director?
Yeah, so what got me started as a director, very similar, although I didn't have a grievance. I got involved with the Leadership Academy. That was my big spring pad into what we're doing right now. And I did that because our industry has served me very, very well. It's wonderful to make the living that I make. I love serving the folks in the Colorado Springs area. And so when I was invited to be part of the Leadership Academy, I took advantage of that. And the big thing that the Leadership Academy gave to me was, here's the behind the curtains, because before I'm like, I hop on the MLS, I get the information I want, and then I walk away.
I so recognize that.
Right? And so going through the process of Leadership Academy, I was like, wow, day at the Capitol, how does the PPAR board work? What's the RSC board looking at? All these different players in the game.
Not just not even mentioning all the policies that are in place to make this a smooth running machine.
1,000%.
Yeah.
So here are the committees I could serve on, right? The public policy, which I love. Clarissa does a fantastic job with that. But just taking a look at how can I give back to our industry. So I didn't really have a grievance. It was just one of those scenarios where I wanted to give back to our industry. And so the opportunity arose where there was some vacancy on the board. And I said, hey, would it be okay if I served in this space? It went before the board. The board let me in, which I was grateful for. You're probably ruining that decision right now, but you let me in.
No, not
But
at
what's
all.
great is I've learned so much. And I think one of my favorite things is not only am I seeing behind the scenes, I'm having an impact on, especially in a tumultuous time such as this, where how am I best serving my peers in this industry and how am I best serving our consumers? And probably my favorite part about that is in going through the mud in something like that, the relationships that I've been able to build on the board, in the board, and around the board have been fantastic. Wouldn't trade it for anything.
So Mark, do you have any misconceptions that you would like to point out that you feel are out there?
Yeah, so I think some of the biggest misconceptions is PPAR and RSC are 2 dramatically different entities, right? And who we are serving, PPAR on the member side, RSC on the subscriber side, that's a huge misconception of who does what and where. I think the other thing is we're out to get people. I don't think that's true. I mean, the reality of it is one of our biggest responsibilities on this board in this role is to provide clear, effective, truthful data, transparent data, right? And so making sure that the realistic stats are out there, making sure that realistic information, we want to make sure that the data we're providing is the absolute best we possibly can.
Yes.
And we do that through different committees and so on and so forth. And there's rules and there's policies that we have to follow in that space to make sure that we can provide that data. And so the misconception is, oh, you're doing this to get me, and we're not.
No,
I mean, we're following our rules, our policies, and our guidelines.
And it's not just our rules and guidelines. It's also that some of that comes from the Real Estate Commission.
Sure.
That wants you to have accurate data.
Yep.
And you don't have to verify it necessarily.
Right.
If the seller tells you it's a certain way, then it's a certain way. But if you know it's not, you have to correct that and make sure that it's accurate, that it is the right square footage, that it's the right number of bedrooms and things like that.
And to your point,
basic.
Are we following an NAR guideline? A state guideline? Could be DORA, right? Could be. Like, what guidelines are we required to follow in order to provide this data?
Well, first of all, there are NAR mandates.
For instance, there are certain things that you cannot do. You cannot, for instance, say, I'm going to offer my services for free. You can't do that. I know you want to do that because you're that good-hearted of a person. nevertheless, there are certain things that you just can't do.
Right.
Second, there's an organization called RSC that before I joined the board, had never heard of.
Right.
But it's the Real Estate Standards Organization.
Yep.
And it's not just, it started here in the United States, but it's actually a worldwide organization where they try to bring all the standards for how is real estate brought out, with which data, in a very efficient way. So if RSC says you got to do it this way, we can't do it another way because that would mess up the system.
Sure.
And all our MLSs, whether it's Matrix or Navica or whatever else is out there, they work with those RSC standards as well.
And I think it's important too, because of those standards and everything else, sometimes the board has the ability to change something, in your case.
Yeah.
Sometimes the board doesn't have the ability to change things. Like
absolutely.
Scott's instance. So I think the misconception is, well, you're the board, just change it. Well, sometimes we can.
No, because we're bound.
Yeah, and other times we can't.
Yeah.
So I always think it's good that misconception is, well, you're not approachable or anything like that. We are. Like, we're in this industry, we're your peers, we want to hear but if we can't do anything, we can't do anything.
Without naming names, but there's a great example of somebody that came to the board with a question about a picture, I believe, and we denied his request.
Yeah.
He was not happy. But now he's serving on the MLS Functionality Committee.
Yeah.
And he has expressed to all of us that actually, my God, there's a lot more behind this than I ever realized. And that's what people need to keep in mind.
Sure.
We're not here to bash them or make them feel bad. We're here to put a good quality product that has accurate data, so they can work with that and enhance their business.
And I'm super grateful for his service.
I'm
so glad
I
he
am
started.
too. I am too.
So when making these decisions for RSC, are you just considering what's best for you as a practitioner, or are you what's the other stuff that you have to consider?
Well, no. And we already discussed some of that stuff, but I have a director's hat and I have a realtor hat and a property management hat. I have three hats.
You have a lot of hats.
I juggle them and it works just fine. The fact is that RSC is a independently owned corporation, right? It's owned by the PPAR. We're a subsidiary, but we are a corporation. And as a corporation, we have a board. And as a board director, we have to wear what we call our board hat, which means that we have to make decisions for our subscribers that benefit our subscribers without jeopardizing the life of our board,
you bet,
so to speak, or the existence of our board is probably the better way to say it. So there may be circumstances that you feel like, yeah, you know what, I want that change because it benefits me. Whether it's a subdivision, a name, or whatever, you can't do that because that is your personal realtor hat that says that, and that sometimes is really hard to separate. However, I feel with our 13 board members altogether, we have a good balance where if that happens, that somebody will always say, hey, you know what, change hats.
And you hit on something there. And I've had some of our peers reach out at the board member to say, hey, don't forget your board hat. And I'm like, that's fair, because I'm also looking at how do I best serve my consumer? Like, so we talked about it the other day at the board meeting. Hey, I can market this best for my seller if I do it this way. Well, but it's not just you that we're worried about. It's not just your seller. We have a buyer's agent. We have a buyer. We have other agents in our marketplace. We're trying to make sure that we're making decisions that most positively impact the entirety of our industry, right? They're our peers. And it can be difficult. Take my hat off of how does this best serve me? Put that board hat on. How does this best serve our industry and our peers, our subscribers, right? Because we're trying, again, to give them the best data we can so they can provide that information to their clients as well.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing too, Hans, like we talk about this data and everything else, especially right now when the market's here and the market's there, and there's so many varying opinions about where the market is. The reason that accurate data is so important, statistics. How often are we providing statistics to our buyers and our sellers to help them make the best decision for their needs? That's what I think sometimes is lost for folks. The whole reason that accurate data is important, there's so many stats out there. And if we're going to provide those stats and that data to our industry, it's important that we have the best data we can, right?
Absolutely.
So who makes up the RSC Board of Directors? It's a great question. Your peers, volunteer realtors, broker owners, appraisers, property managers. So look for more information coming soon regarding applications to the RSC Board of Directors. Hey, we encourage you to take this information and consider if this might be a good way for you to serve your fellow realtors. Hey, that's all we have for this episode. Hit subscribe below to make sure you don't miss our next video in the series. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you soon.